Citing evidence is an important skill to have. This is a tutorial on in-text citations. The Common Core learning targets are: I can cite strong and thorough textual evidence to support analysis of what the text says explicitly, as well as inferences drawn from the text. I can seamlessly incorporate textual evidence into my own literary response. Citing sources within your writing. When referencing an author's words within a response, it is important to cite that source correctly. We start by putting quotes around the author's words, so we need to copy those exactly. Then put the author's last name and the page number inside parentheses. So here's an example. If the author was Lee, page 54. Finally, move the period to the end of the sentence outside of the parentheses, which might be a little counterintuitive, but the period goes on the outside. So here's an example. You can think copy, copy, page, page, period. So copy, copy, so quotes around what you've copied, parentheses around the page number, and put the period on the outside. So copy, copy, page, page, period. Let's look at a few examples. A quote, "That made Mike Jordan into Michael Jordan," end quote, parentheses, author's last name, always last name, and page number, parentheses, and the period on the outside. Another example, quote, "Depression is a side effect of dying, period." Quote, parentheses, "Cancer is also a side effect of dying, period. Almost everything is, comma, really," parentheses, quotation marks. So the parentheses were part of the actual quotation. And then do the same thing. Parentheses, author's last name, page number, parentheses, and the period on the outside. Last example, quote, "Not only are we in the districts forced to remember the iron grip of the capital's power each year, we are forced to celebrate it," quotation mark, end quote. You have the parentheses, author's last name, page number, parentheses, and the period on the outside again. And that's from the Hunger Games. So citing a direct quote. When you have text that you want to quote directly, follow these steps. So direct quote, you're copying exactly. Copy the quote word for word using the exact same punctuation, spelling, etc. Attribute the author and the page number directly after the quoted text. So you need to give credit to the author. So this is the title, Air Attacks. Here's the quote, here's the author, and the page number. And in a research paper, you would have a works cited page, and it should match what you have in your citation here, is what should be the first word in the works cited. What if you don't know the author's last name? Use the title of the text instead. So put titles of books in italics and titles of articles in quotation marks. You may shorten a long title, but make sure it connects to the bibliography or works cited that's at the end of your paper. So example, Jim Crow laws extended into almost every facet of public life. It's from, this is the name of the article, Critical Essays on Racial Relations in the Southern United States. So they shortened it here because that would be really long. You could even have just, you probably want as much as Critical Essays on Racial Relations, and then the page number. And again, period on the outside. Here's 3 ways to include evidence when you're writing. Number 1 is my favorite, the blended quote. Sometimes people call it, so also known as, the run-in quote. I'm not a fan of that term because it sounds like a run-on, which is a bad thing, but it's a great thing. 2, peppering a quote, another great technique. 3, block quotations for long citations. So here we go. The blended run-in quote. is a piece of evidence that runs into your own writing. You can quote a full sentence or several short sentences. As with all quotes, you must include some of your own words before it. So always, you should never start with quotation marks. Lead into it. So here we go. Examples of run-in quotes. Oops. After Mrs. Dubose had died, Atticus explained to Jem she was a morphine addict. So it's blending in with the sentence naturally, setting up why this quote is there. And again, look at the proper formatting. So it's weird to me not to put the period inside here or a comma or anything, but it's just the page number and the period on the outside. The reason why the author's name probably isn't here is because if you're writing about a piece of literature, you probably mention that at the beginning of your essay, so you don't have to put the author's name again, just the page number. Harper Lee showed Jem was quite upset that Mrs. Dubose had sent him a perfect camellia, so Jem picked up the candy box and threw it in the fire. Again, this is skillful, blending the words from the quote within your sentence. Jem was quite upset that Mrs. Dubose had sent him a perfect camellia, so Jem picked up the candy box and threw it in the fire, blah, blah, blah. Again, it blends in naturally and perfectly with what they were trying to prove. Peppering a quote is when you replace words in your essay with exact words and or phrases that the author used. Limit your peppering to 4 or 5 words. You need quotation marks around your peppering and a page number after. So even if you just borrow a word or two, if you copied it, it's good to give credit to the author. So the kids wondered about the quote, the malevolent phantom, end quote, page 8, until they could think of nothing else. Boo became their obsession. So this is skillful again, because if you write the malevolent phantom, most teachers are going to know those weren't your own words. You need to give credit. Block quotations is if you copy more than 4 lines of text. It's pretty rare, but a block quotation is indented 1 inch from your margin, and it lacks quotation marks because the indentation tells the reader it is a long quote. Because there's no quotation marks, your end punctuation comes before the parenthetical page number. So let's see an example. So this would be an example of a very long citation. So I'm using citation and quotation interchangeably. So this is, I won't read this whole thing. Obviously, if you were quoting this though, you don't put it in quotation marks, you just indent and in one block. So you don't even make your own paragraph, you indent the whole thing. And again, the period in this case will come before the page number. Paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is when you put something in your own words, but you should still cite the author's thoughts, even if you do put them in your own words. So for example, when Charlie, this is from Flowers for Algernon, even when Charlie beat Algernon, who he considered to be a very smart mouse, Keys 357, he did not perceive himself as being smart. So in this case, there's no quotation marks because this wasn't copied exactly word for word from the text, but this idea was. It was said in different words, but it's copied from the story. So they're giving credit to the author, Keys, and the page number where they found it. It's really strong evidence if you can point to the page number where you found something. Deleting parts of a citation. So sometimes you don't want to copy every single thing. So if you desire to use only certain parts of a statement or paragraph of an author's words to prove your own point, use the ellipses, those are the 3 dots, between the phrases you cite. So for example, there was a long citation. Dr. Strauss's and Dr. Niemer's medical ethics are at times questionable. I like this use of a semicolon here. They even disagree with each other. They wanted to use Charlie in a human experiment, but, quote, They don't know if it will be permanent, ... Dr. Niemer and Dr. Strauss argued about it, and then they gave the attribution here, telling who the author, page number, period outside. So right here, there was more information that wasn't necessary, so they left it out. Say no to orphaned quotes, please. Orphaned quotes are quotes that are incorrectly written because you did not include some of your own words before the quote. Sometimes we call them quote bombs too, because they're just bombs dropped in the middle of your writing. The narrator knew what he was doing at the time of the crime, period. Quote, I decided to take the life of the old man, end quote, 11. This shows that he was sane at the time of the crime. So it doesn't sound terrible, but it would be much stronger if there were words before the quote. The narrator knew what he was doing at the time of the crime. You could even blend it, because he said, or he admitted, but something before we know, so we know who's talking here and why. Okay. So this time, oh, I did add it in here. So this time it's introduced with your own words. So the narrator knew what he was doing at the time of the crime. While confessing the details of his crime, comma, he admitted, comma, I decided to take the life of the old man. So it's stronger when you add this phrase in here instead of a quote coming out of nowhere. It's set up. What was the situation when this happened? Why are we including this? Who's I? It makes it all more clear. Citing dialogue. I think, well, okay, we'll keep going. Citing dialogue. What? There's more. Yep. There's one more rule about how to cite dialogue, so conversations. So here's an example of dialogue from the short story The Necklace. So this is what you do. Step 1, put quotes around the text you copied from another author. So if you're copying it, put quotes all around it. So even if it includes dialogue, so someone is talking in here, you still put quotes around it. Step 2, change all from the original. If there's quotations in the part you are citing, change it to single quotation marks. So here, this is where there was a conversation. Instead of double now, I changed it to single. What's going to look weird, looks weird to me too, is that there's 3 here. So it's ending the conversation and then it's ending your citation. But that's correct. And then again, add your citation. So give the parentheses, author's last name, page number, parentheses. And then move that period that was here, move it outside. So you don't need a period in here. So this is what it would look like. The correct citation, you would have quotation mark. You can have singles for conversations within your citation. The conversation ends here. Your quote ends here, your citation. This is where you give credit to the author, page number, parentheses, and the period on the outside. And I think that's where we'll stop for today.